In this episode, Kaighla explains how she did not have a good experience of converting to Islam. You will benefit by learning from her mistakes. Did you know that some people have such a bad experience of converting to Islam that they leave the religion altogether? Listen to this episode so you don't become one of them. Learn that not all Muslims are perfect and some have faults. This will help you so you can enter Islam with realistic expectations of what might happen. Avoid these common mistakes and learn Kaighla's theory of converting to Islam in a slow, natural and sustainable way so you can be successful in what will be a lifetime journey after you become Muslim. Kaighla is 33 years old and is from Danville, Illinois. She converted to Islam in 2008, that was 12 years ago. She is an author, an editor and a teacher. Welcome to the show, Kaighla.
Hey, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Peace be upon you too. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
Okay, Kaighla, so I mentioned a lot about you in the introduction. First question I want to ask you about is what made you convert to Islam? So you've been a Muslim now for 12 years. So what made you convert to Islam?
So I, before I converted to Islam, was a pretty evangelical Christian for many years. I attended Bible college and I was a missionary, and that was kind of core to my being. And on a trip to India, I kind of came to this point that I really just couldn't, there were things about the Christian faith that I couldn't buy anymore, things I couldn't swallow anymore, especially as it pertains to the Trinity and so on. And you know, no one in my family is Christian. They don't have a religion at all. I was the only religious one in general. So I spent a couple years not having a relationship with God at all, just kind of being unsure what to do and where to go and how to find that peace. And I kind of looked into all the major world religions, just wondering, is there something I'm missing? You know, if I feel like Christianity just doesn't make any sense to me and I can't accept it, you know, is there some other place I can find this connection with God? And so I started to read, you know, a lot about all the major world religions, really. And I could tell you in, you know, a simple way why I didn't feel like they were true for me. But I didn't know anything about Islam because, you know, raised in America post 9/11, I was just raised to, you know, believe it's you know, wholesale evil and there's nothing good in it, and don't even waste your time looking into it and so on. So I didn't even try. And I realized kind of the hypocrisy of that, because that's not who I am. Like, why would I look into all the other major world religions, you know, intentionally avoid Islam? Like I said, the worst thing that can happen is I find out a bunch of really crappy, you know, things and you know, whatever, then I'll know why I don't want this religion. But when I started to learn about it, I actually read Yahya Emmerich. He's a convert as well. He has a book called The Idiot's Guide to Understanding Islam, The Complete Idiot's Guide to Understanding Islam. And when I read about the basics of Tawheed and, you know, what Islam teaches about what happens after death and so on and so forth, the more I read this book, the more I realized, like, I already believed those things. I just didn't know there was a name to, you know, a label to what I was believing. And those things that I thought just made me a really, you know, bad Christian really just were because I was Muslim, but I didn't know it. And so at the time I got a job at a Muslim boarding school right outside of Chicago. And they told me, like, look, we don't really care if you're Muslim or not. Like, that's not our business. We're hiring you as an English teacher. If you want to be Muslim, there's a library here, but, you know, that's your business. And the people I was surrounded with were, you know, had excellent character, and, you know, really surprised me with that. And I started to read the Quran, and ultimately it was actually in Ramadan. I came to the middle of Surah Al-Ma'idah, where, you know, God says to Jesus, did you tell these people to worship you? You know, and Jesus says, of course not. Like, I told them what you told me to tell them, which is, you know, worship my God and your God. It's, you know, I can't be held accountable for what they did after I left the earth. And I was like, well, that's it. There it is right there. Like, God is speaking directly at me about this. Like, here it is. And that's all that I knew. I didn't know the ins and outs. I didn't know the different, squabbles over madhahib. I didn't know the difference between Sunni and Shia. I didn't know anything. I just knew I believed in Tawheed, and that's all I had. I believed that Muhammad was one of the prophets, and that's all I had. Like I didn't have more than that, and I wasn't prepared for what was going to come after. I thought it was simple. I thought Christianity is complicated because of all these different denominations, but Islam really just has two denominations. And, that's how it was presented to me, as something very simple and very based on human nature and fitra. And so it seemed to me to be the answer to my existential woes at the time.
Okay, and you mentioned that your first contact was with the Idiot's Guide. So what actually made you pick up the book and start researching?
As I said, I didn't know anything about Islam, and I didn't feel good about the fact that I had looked into the other major world religions, but not Islam. I felt, as a researcher and as a person who I like to consider myself unbiased, I felt this doesn't make a lot of sense, that I could have spent all these years studying about Buddhism and Hinduism and Judaism and Christianity and not even given a second glance to Islam. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I'm the kind of person who I look under every rock. I look in every nook and cranny. I want to fully understand a thing. And I didn't feel okay ethically with the fact that I was, ignoring an entire sector of major world religions by not looking into Islam. So I just wanted to be able to, at least, if nothing else, have a clear, summary of why I didn't believe it was true, like I could for Judaism and Hinduism and Buddhism and so on. I didn't know enough about Islam to say this is why I don't believe it. So I wanted to learn enough about it to, if not find peace in it, at least be able to say, you know what, I tried. I looked in it. I gave it a chance, like all the others, and I didn't find what I was looking for, etc.
Okay, so that was a major turning point, reading that book. So what was the second major turning point before you accepted Islam?
Um, so I was a single mom. My son was about a year old, and I was homeless at the time. I was dependent on the kindness of a friend, and that friend was kind of a toxic friend, and I was just in a really bad situation. And I think, it's a common thing actually when I talk to converts. We find God when we're at our lowest, when our face is on the ground and we, don't see another option. The light, we're so desperate for the light because we're so surrounded by darkness and fear. And so my actual life was in a not very good place, and I really was struggling. I was really struggling to have hope and have peace. And again, I had a small son, and I was homeless. And so when I felt, in reading The Idiot's Guide, when I felt like it made a lot of sense to me, at least, and I had questions, I called a masjid. And unfortunately, I don't know what the situation is in Australia, but in America, the vast majority of masajid don't even have anyone to answer the phones, because the board doesn't want to pay someone to just answer the phone if someone calls. And if they do have someone to answer the phone, that person probably doesn't speak English. And that's what happened. I called a masjid, and the person who answered didn't speak English and didn't understand what I was saying. I just wanted to talk to somebody. Like, I just had questions, and that person had no idea what I was saying, but they got my number. And I thought, yeah, no one's going to call me. But then someone did. Another convert called me and said she received my number from the masjid, and she invited me to come and sit with her. And I told her both of my religious, interests, and also of my practical situation. And she told me about the school, that they were hiring a teacher, and that because I was qualified, I had several years of teaching experience at that point. She's like, maybe you could work there, and it's actually a boarding school, so they might have space for you and your son. And that's what happened. So in this Muslim community just took me in and offered me kindness, and they offered me belonging, and and it seemed very devoid of expectations. It was very much like because you are a suffering person, because you need sadaqah, because you and your innocent son don't have anywhere to go, because you don't have a supportive family, we will be your family. And this is a common thread with converts. I've heard that they are promised as soon as they convert, like, oh, you're going to have a worldwide family. People all over the world are your family now because you're Muslim. And I wanted that sense of belonging, that sense of being part of a family. So I guess the second step was really these Muslims showing me kindness and welcoming me and my son and alleviating a very real and tangible threat in my life, and the fact that my son and I were homeless, and just that practical offering of help really said a lot about their character, which to me said there has to be something in this Islam that would make these people be so generous.
Okay, so at that point, when you started working at the boarding school, was there a long time then before you converted to Islam? Did it take a long time?
No, it took I want to say a month. I think I moved in mid-July, and I converted in mid-August, or it was late August actually, I think August 29th. It was like the 10th of Ramadan that year. It was 2009. So I was only there for like a month before I converted because, we all know, like, in Ramadan, Muslims are just, even more Muslimy. And so the spiritual fervor was really addictive, and, everybody was taking part. And I was just surrounded by people who wanted the extra barakah that you get in Ramadan, and especially if you guide someone to Islam. And so people were literally competing for the opportunity to, like, teach me how to pray, and competing with each other for the opportunity to show me any kind of, like, sadaqah, really. And that, to me, I didn't realize they were doing that partially because it was Ramadan. Like, that's not how they would normally behave. That's, the excess worship that people do in Ramadan. And so I thought, oh wow, these people are, like, you know, incredibly kind and selfless and good. And so that definitely influenced me.
So that was definitely a quick turnaround. If you say that you accepted Islam in just a month.
Well, I think I was reading about Islam for a month before I got the job, and then living at the school for a month. So it was about 2 months. I mean, and when I tell you that I didn't know anything, I truly didn't know anything. And I remember that one of the women I worked with, this other Palestinian teacher, she asked me, what's taking you so long? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I've been learning about Islam for like 2 months now. She's like, right, but what's holding you back from saying Shahada and, like, saving your eternal soul from hellfire if you die right now? And so she put a lot of pressure on me. And she was like, look, if you believe La ilaha illallah and you believe Muhammad Rasulullah, this makes you Muslim. You better just say Shahada now and save your soul. Everything else will work itself out in time. But if you believe these two fundamental things, then you are Muslim and you should say Shahada, like, now. And so I felt pressured into moving forward. Um, it just felt like this inevitable thing that was going to happen. So I may as well do it now, before I really knew what I was getting myself into.
Right. So do you think it would have been better for you to go slower at the time?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Because only a month after I converted, I was engaged to the sheikh who destroyed my life. I had maybe 2 months of being Muslim without his abuse, without his Islamically justified abuse. I only had 2 months of pure relationship with me and God before he hijacked my faith. And if I had taken my time and really thought things through and read more and educated myself more, I would never have allowed myself to be pressured into marriage at all, certainly not with him. But because I didn't know anything about Islam, and because I felt I was pressured into finding a husband when I wasn't ready, and I chose him because he was a sheikh, and I thought, well, he can teach me because I don't know anything. If I had taken the time to learn on my own before I even said the Shahada, things would have turned out very differently.
Okay. So do you think this is a problem with all converts is that they are rushing into it?
Certainly not all. I have many friends who took years and years, and those friends have a really healthy faith. They have a healthy, established, strong faith because they thought about it. I mean, I compare it to really dating and marriage. I mean, you know, twice now I've married a man I barely knew because I was pressured into it too quickly by religious dictates. And you know that if you know someone for a while and you develop friendship and genuine respect, that's a solid foundation for marriage versus the kind of shoddy foundation that you get when you rush into things because, oh no, we need to avoid fitna. I think in that same way, if you rush into committing to Islam before you really know what you're getting yourself into, before you're fully aware, you're making a decision based on desperation, or you're making a decision based on, misinformation or lack of information. And I think that the people I know who have a very strong faith now, the converts I know who have a strong faith now, are the people who took a long time really, really making sure this was the right decision for them. And I think that that makes all the difference.
Okay, so what's the solution then to stop people from rushing into Islam and making mistakes like this?
Leave them be. Trust the process. Let people take their time doing what they're doing. Don't feel this religious fervor to convert them as if it's somehow, you know, as I told you, I used to be a Christian missionary, and part of my training as a Christian missionary was like, if you do a bad job, if you have a bad day and and you behave in a bad way, and somebody sees you and they know you're a Christian, and then that's why they decide not to be Christian, God is going to hold you accountable. Like it's your fault that they didn't, convert to Christianity because you had a bad day that day, right? There's a lot of pressure as if like someone's eternal soul depends on you. And one of the things I loved about Islam when I first started learning about it was that that's not how it's supposed to be in Islam. Allah argues in the Quran again and again and again. It is Allah who guides people. It is Allah who leads people astray. It is Allah who is guiding and deciding all of this. And we don't have any power in that way. So I think if Muslims would stop thinking and stop assuming that they have some sort of skin in the game, as it were, when it comes to people converting, and stop pressuring us when we're not ready, and stop, you know, um, putting forward their best face, as it were. So, one of the problems I find a lot with converts, and this is based on these 12 years of um, being a public face of Islam and having people come to me and tell me their stories. One of the things I find often is that people felt like they were duped. They were promised something that was not delivered. They were promised an extremely supportive community that never materialized. They were promised guidance that they never received. They were promised friendship that never happened. And they felt like somebody was sugarcoating the situation for them and painting it as very different than it is. When the truth of the matter is that Muslims are just people. They're not better than other people, unfortunately. And, they're flawed. And the Muslim community is not a more successful or cohesive community than any other. It's still a religious community made up of flawed human beings who cannot possibly, be more than they are. But that's not that's not the story that we're receiving when people are making da'wah. That's not the message that we're receiving. We're receiving a message of like, no, we're better than those other religious communities. Join our team. So I think the solution is Muslims need to stop looking at it like that. It's not. There's no extra points if you get somebody to say shahada when they're not ready. In fact, it's very likely they're going to end up leaving Islam if they do it when they're not ready. So just trust the process. Trust Allah to guide this person the best possible way in the right time.
Yeah, I agree with you that situation, does happen where people paint this beautiful picture. So, you mentioned about people talking about how they were duped and they were given all these promises and so forth. Now, from your experience, what percentage of converts do you think actually suffer from this?
Oh, there's no possible way I could say a percentage,
Just have a guess,
because
maybe like a ratio.
40. I can
Okay.
go with 40. I mean, there are actually solid numbers out there. There was what is the name of that organization in America that does the polls? The, oh gosh.
Census or something like that.
No. It's oh goodness. It's a sociological organization that does, like, you always hear about these polls. I'm going to think of it later. I'm sure I will. Anyway, it's a very well-respected organization. And they did some digging and did, some polling of American Muslims, especially converts. And it's something like the percentage of people who come into Islam each year is equal to the percentage of people who leave Islam each year. It's something like 7%. Something like 7% of people, in America end up converting to Islam, and then 7% of Muslims in America end up leaving Islam, around that, or it might be 6%. It's basically the same. So we're out here in the world claiming that, we're the fastest growing religion in America, but nobody is looking at the other numbers and the other statistics that there are just as many Muslims leaving Islam as those who are joining. And they look at it as, so again, back to the marriage similarities here. It's kind of like people preparing for the wedding, spending lots and lots and lots and lots of money on the wedding, right? But not preparing for the marriage. So they're doing all this work to really, really make things great to get people into the club, as it were. But they're not spending half as much energy or time thinking about how to keep us in the club. The organization is Pew Research. It's a Pew Research poll, PEW, Pew. They're a well-known American research organization.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I can also put the link to that in the show notes. So the thing that I'm still thinking about now is the ratio you gave me. So you said that 40% of converts actually suffer from this problem where people are they're feeling like they're duped and they're given all these promises which don't come true. But then 60% are not affected, they don't feel duped, and they actually get all these promises. Is that how you see it?
I don't think that I don't think that they get all the promises. I think that they had realistic expectations, right? So the ones who don't feel duped, the ones I've spoke to who don't feel that way, it's because they had realistic expectations going in. They were like, no, I didn't, whatever was promised to me, I knew that, Muslims are people and they're not going to be perfect and they're not going to be ideal, and they had realistic expectations going in. So they didn't feel tricked in any way. It was like, well, I know that they're doing what they're doing and they have good intentions, but, I didn't expect it to go that way. The ones that I've spoken to who felt duped, it was more, they truly, sincerely believed the promises that were made to them and were shocked, really shocked. And again, that 40% is I have no basis to make that statement. It's there's no scientific
Yeah, sure. It's a pure guess.
Aware about that number. I don't recommend putting that anywhere because I can't,
yeah, I understand.
But I can tell you that I had a podcast for a couple of months with another friend of mine who's also a convert called Love the Converts. And it was all about this, about, look, we've got a problem. The Muslim community has a problem. Converts are leaving Islam. And the reason they're leaving Islam is because of our extremely ineffective and, short-term focused dawah efforts. We're doing a bad job bringing people into this religion. We need to do better. And here's what we think we could do better. And that was, it's called Love the Converts.
Sure. Okay. So what are some of the promises that converts are given?
Oh, you're going to have a global family, everybody calling everybody brother and sister, and this implied intimacy that people are going to genuinely care for you because they're required to, because of the magic of Islam making their heart care about you, fi sabilillah. That, people from all kinds of other cultures that have nothing in common with you are just going to magically care for you deeply because you also happen to be Muslim. That the questions are going to be answered in a thorough and sincere way. For example, Christianity is my experience with Christianity anyway, if you had questions, it was like, no, just have faith, just trust in God, stop asking questions. And one of the things that the Dawa people like to emphasize is that Islam is not like that. Islam is a scientific religion. Islam is is an intelligent religion. We ask questions, we look deeper, we encourage questioning. That's what I was told before I converted, that it's good to question and we encourage it. But that's definitely not what really happened. Once you're actually in Islam, again, in my experience and the experience of some of the people I've spoken with, questioning is not welcomed by the community. It's very much like, no, that's shaitan, a'udhu billah, sit over there and be quiet. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's those things primarily, that you're going to have a really supportive community all over the world who's just going to magically care for you just because you happen to have the same faith, that you're going to be educated and informed accurately, by people who sincerely care for you.
I asked you already what the solution is. So, I've heard about, you've told me a lot about the negatives here of the situation. So can you now tell me what can be done? How can it be better for the converts that are coming in?
We have to be honest with them. I remember a conversation I had at a masjid nearby about probably 2 years ago. And we were sitting at this table. It was 8 women. 3 of them were visitors to the masjid. They were just, people who were, I don't know if they were interested in Islam or if they were doing it for a class or what, because it's in a university town. But 3 of the women at the table were non-Muslim, and then there was 5 of us who were. And all of the 5 women at the table who were Muslim were wearing hijab. And one of the women who were not Muslim asked, something like, do you wear that because you want to or because you have to? And everybody at the table, and these women some of them had, Arab ancestry, some of them had a Pakistani ancestry. They came from all over the world, and they were like, oh no, absolutely, it's my choice. I want to. Absolutely, I want to. And there was one other convert at the table, and she and I were kind of looking at each other and communicating over the table by looking at each other because that's not our experience. Because our husbands threaten to divorce us if we take off hijab. Because that's just to behave as if Muslim women in general are wearing, the majority of them are wearing hijab because they want to, is just not true. There's a huge majority who are wearing hijab because they don't want to be divorced, because they don't want to be thrown out on the street, because they don't want to be excommunicated, because they don't want to be killed in some places. I mean, to act as if it's a perfect situation and everybody is this, the message that we're given to the West, that Islam liberates women. They have the right to choose what to do with their body, unlike these poor, uncivilized Western women who are just slaves to the fashion industry and to the sex drives of men, blah, blah, blah. We need to stop acting like Muslims are somehow immune to human nature, that we're somehow safe from the social ills that all other people have. There's just simply nothing about the Muslim experience that makes it that protects you from the human experience. To be Muslim is to be human, and we need to stop painting this religious community as something better than it is. And we don't have to do that. People are coming into Islam who are not being told all of these lofty promises because Allah is guiding them. We don't have to do this. We don't have to paint it like that. We can be frank with people. If you want to be part of Islam, do it for Allah. Don't do it for the people, because the people will let you down again and again and again, because they're people. They're just people. But if we keep walking around and acting like Muslims are somehow superior, that they're somehow better people, we're going to keep on letting people down and duping them, really. And so I think we've got to just be honest, just be more honest. This is what Islam is. This is what, these are the various different teachings about this and this and this. This is what it is. Take it or leave it. We don't need to beautify it and make it. Islam is already beautiful. We don't have to try and make it shiny and polished and covered in sugar to make people want it. Their hearts, if they're going to follow their fitrah, if Allah is going to guide them, we don't have to make these lofty promises that we can't keep.
Yeah. I think the people who you're talking about, they are trying to paint this picture of Islam, which is possible in many cases. And the reason why they do it is because they think they're trying to do something good. They're trying to please their God by bringing people to Islam. And, I guess they're just going overboard with some things, and they're not looking at the whole picture and understanding that people are not perfect. Muslims are not perfect.
They definitely have good intentions. I'm not at all implying that they have nefarious intentions at all. They have good intentions. They're just short-sighted. What they need to do is hand over the work of guiding people to Islam to the converts ourselves. Who knows better than the convert how to guide someone to Islam? We know what worked and what didn't. We know what we needed to hear and what would have helped us. And this is why I wrote the New Muslims Field Guide with Teresa, because we were tired of seeing this happen, that the people who don't have any experience converting to Islam in a post 9/11 America or the West in general, those people who have no experience losing your family and your job and your friends because of this religion, those people don't have any right to be talking about it, to be telling us, giving us advice or guiding us. They don't have any experience. Why should we listen to these people who, mashallah, were raised in a Muslim family, who've never had to sacrifice for their Islam? Why should we listen to them? Let's listen to the people who know what they're talking about, who've been through it. Let's listen to the people who culturally, are similar to us, rather than the aunties and uncles, who came here 30 years ago, who don't know anything about our culture or what it's like to go from non-Muslim to Muslim in a place like this. Let's listen to people who are speaking in our language rather than writing a book in Urdu or Arabic and then poorly translating it to English and not even hiring an editor. Let's let the converts speak. Let the converts tell their story. Let the converts guide people to Islam. We need more masajid that are owned and run by converts, rather than the unfortunate problem we have in America anyway, where the vast majority of masajid are funded by Saudi Arabia, so they have Wahhabi sentiments in the mashaykh. They are ill-prepared for how to actually offer Islam in a Western context, and they're run in the day-to-day by a board of people who are 60 and older, who don't have any idea what modern young Muslims are facing. Islam is in the hands of the young generation always, and we need to put it in the hands. I remember in Bible college, a missionary came to speak to a class that I was in, and he said, we were all of us, Americans who wanted to go, to foreign countries and, guide people to Jesus, etc. And this Indian man, he said, I'll be honest with you, if what you want is to guide people to Christ, then you would spend the same amount of money. Wow, that's a dog. You would spend the same amount of money to support indigenous, pastors, rather than spending that money to go on your little missionary trip. The way that that our religion has truly been established in a country is that it's the indigenous people of that country, the natives of that country, that are carrying it forward. And so Islam is not going to have the life and vivacity that it should have in this country until the masajid and Islam, is an American sort of propagated thing by people who actually know what it is. And when I say American, I mean that in the broadest sense. Whatever ethnicity you are, wherever you come from, but raised in America, raised in this culture, understanding what Islam actually is offering to young people today in this culture.
Okay, and you mentioned about the book that you wrote. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the New Muslims Field Guide, is basically an honest and sincere and really, really funny guidebook for people who either have recently accepted Islam or have recently begun practicing Islam. So even if it's, people like yourself who were raised at least partially Muslim, or, have some experience with Islam, but they didn't start practicing until, later. So it's for both converts and newly practicing Muslims. And it's all about the stuff that you're not going to learn in most books about, social situations, and, how to tell your family that you converted, and how to handle it if they're not very happy about it. How to, you don't have to change your name. Your name is a Muslim name if you're a Muslim. You don't have to have an Arabic name to be Muslim. You don't have to give up your culture to be Muslim. Your culture is beautiful. Take the beautiful parts of your culture and leave the bad parts. There's nothing more Muslim about Arab or Pakistani or, what have you culture. There's nothing, more Muslimy about that. There's nothing more Muslimy about speaking Arabic or Urdu. Speak your language. That's fine too. You don't have to give up all your friends when you convert. Give up the ones that, might be trying to, take Islam from you, or might be, bashing it, but you don't have to walk away from the people who love you. You don't have to walk away from your family. In fact, you should work really hard to maintain ties with your family. We're trying to repudiate all of the things that we were told, which were not true when we converted, i.e. that you have to change your name, that you have to get rid of all the people in your life who aren't Muslim, that you have to, another one, women can't have any male friends. So, as soon as I converted to Islam, the people around me were like, oh, no, you can't have friends that are guys. Haram aleki, that's haram. No, like, So, I literally severed relationships that I had established for decades just because these men were men, who'd not done anything wrong to me, who'd not in any way come on to me, but just because of their gender, I was pressured into giving up those friendships, for example. So we talk in the book about how that's ridiculous. No, and then we talk a lot about marriage, and here's why you shouldn't rush into it, and here's why that's a horrible idea, and here's why you should be careful, and here's why, especially if you're a female, you are going to be prey. You are going to be prey to people who have nefarious intent. And here's how to protect yourself from that. If you're a male convert, here's how the Muslim community is likely to make it hard for you to even find a spouse. And here's how to overcome that. Here's some questions to ask somebody before you think of marrying them. Here are your rights in marriage. Here are your responsibilities in marriage. Here are the basic overview of the 5 pillars of Islam. Here are the basic overviews of the 6 pillars of faith. We even have a letter in our chapter about families. We have a letter about that you can copy and give to your family. Look, yeah, I'm Muslim now, but I still love you, and I still love my culture, and I'm still American, or whatever culture you're from. That you can just kind of photocopy and alter it as you like and give to your family. We have a chapter on Islam should make your heart soft. Unfortunately, a lot of converts, and I'm sure that you've seen this too, when we first convert, are very, very zealous, just very, very, very religious, and just super, super extreme, because Islam cost us something, and we want to do the best we can. And so we just dive right in and start wearing hijab right away, and start fasting right away, and, start praying all of the fard and all of the sunnah and the nawafil, and just doing everything. And unfortunately, we all go through this judgmental streak where you start looking down on other Muslims, born and otherwise, just, judging them harshly. And so we argue Islam, if you're doing it right, should be making your heart soft. It should be making you have more compassion for people, not less. If you start to feel like you're haughty and judgmental, humble yourself before God, because that's not Islam doing that to you. That's your ego, etc. So, we cover a lot of topics, but the gist of it is, it's written by people who actually have experience converting to Islam. It's written by people who are native to this country, so we understand the culture and what you're going to be dealing with. It's written by people in English for English speakers, not in another language and translated. And it's written, the positive reviews are always saying again and again, I felt like they were my friends sitting right next to me, drinking tea and having good conversation. There's a lot of humor in it. There's a lot of candor. it just feels like a good friend sitting you down and being honest with you in a kind and loving way. And I'm so very proud of that book.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. So, where do we find this book?
You can find it on Amazon.com. If you happen to be in Singapore, you can purchase it from Warda Books on Basora Road. They also have it online. There's many different Islamic bookstores in America that sell it as well. There's Masajid who stock it at their masjid. There's New Muslim boxes that keep it stocked. You can also buy it from Daybreak Press, which is it is the publishing house associated with Rabata. I don't know if you know Ansa Tamara Gray, Sheikha Tamara Gray, but she is the head of Rabata, and Daybreak Press is her publishing house. And we received awards from Daybreak Press, both for the New Muslims Field Guide and for my book, Things That Shatter. And they sell it online as well. So there's a lot of options of where you can purchase it.
That's great. Yeah, I think the things you're talking about here are a must read for anyone who's thinking about Islam or even new Muslims as well. And it's excellent. It's great that you've got, you've put your effort into producing something like this.
Alhamdulillah. We hear that it's really helping people a lot, and that's what we want. If I could summarize for you in just a couple of words, my ambition, my intent, my hope at this point, it is, don't be like me. My story is a tragedy. What happened to me and how my faith was hijacked is a tragedy that should not happen and is preventable if Muslims would just try harder. And so I tell the truth about my experience, not to shame us, not to air our dirty laundry, but because what has happened to me and the destruction of my faith was not, it was totally avoidable. And here's how to avoid it.
Okay, so tell me now, how did Islam help you to overcome what the Muslims did to you?
I think that when I think about Islam, I think I see two different paths. I see the path of traditional organized religious Islam, which is dictated by, various madhahib and, scholarly interpretation and a lot of confusing, webs of it's all very chaotic and can be used, unfortunately. And then I think of another path, which is the Islam of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and Ismail and all of the prophets. I think the term Islam in the purest sense, peace through submission to God. When I think of that Islam, I have peace in my heart. That is the Islam that I braced, the simple message of Tawheed, without all the complicated fiqh, without all of the arguing left and right over this and that. So that organized Islam, that the Islam that was used to justify my abuse, that is something I want nothing to do with, that I will never go back to. But Islam in the purest sense, where I submit my heart to God and I draw myself near to God and I make my ambitions those things which are pleasing to God based on both the Quran and my fitrah. We are disconnected from our fitrah, and I don't just mean Muslims. We as a human society are disconnected from our intuition. We are taught, no, trust the experts. No, don't listen to your fitrah. Don't listen to your intuition. Trust the experts. Listen to the other people. And I have thrown that yoke off of myself. No longer do I seek permission or validation from a sheikh for my understanding of things. No longer do I berate myself for not fitting into a cookie cutter image of what a Muslim woman is supposed to look like according to XYZ scholar, a very narrow, extremely narrow view of a religion that has been evolving around the world for all these years. I won't accept that narrow view any longer. I answer to Allah and Allah alone. I don't anymore. When Allah says in the Quran that He intended that we would tadabbur wa tadakkur, think and ponder and He says, look around you, look in nature, look at the changing of the seasons and the night to the day, and the beauty of a mother's love for her child, and so on, and see all of the ayat that Allah is providing. And he says, I've made my tawheed known to you both outside of you and within you. And I think that this is the Islam that I am pursuing now. The further I step away from the arguments and the debates and all of this of what Islam is supposed to be, and I quiet my heart, and I stop listening to the squabbles of the scholars, I proverbially go to the desert as the prophets did in my heart, and I listen to the voice of God. And that fitrah, that voice of that fitrah gets louder and louder the closer that I draw to myself, and the further, and to people who are of like mind. And the further I get from very narrow-minded, very conservative, traditional, Wahhabist or Salafi Islam, the further I get from all of that, the nearer I feel to God. And the first time I met God was before I was even a Christian, before I was a Muslim. I met God in a cornfield outside my house. It became very apparent to me that God was there and that God loved me very much. And that pure, unadulterated love that was not conditioned, no one taught me this. It was my fitrah speaking to me. My ambition now is to get back to that girl who knew deep inside of her, more than she knew even that she was alive. She knew God is here. God created me. God loves me. God wants me.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I'm hearing a lot of truth in the things you were saying, and it's very helpful. Very helpful. So, tell me, besides the book that you talked about, what are some other ways that our listeners can get in contact with you? Do you have a YouTube channel or other avenues?
So I have a YouTube channel. I'm not very active on it, but if you just search for Kaighla Dayo on YouTube, there's a channel there. I have a couple of videos up. There's, generally, if you just Google Kaighla Dayo, you'll learn a lot. There's interviews like this one that I've done, both audio and video and written interviews. People can also read Things That Shatter, which is my memoir of my story, how I came to Islam, how I met the Sheikh, what he did to me, what happened to me in Egypt, the fallout of all of that, the PTSD and anxiety that I now suffer with, and my inability to discern authentic Islam from what he taught me. That entire story is in my award-winning book, Things That Shatter. People can learn that story if they'd like to, because unfortunately my story is very common. I receive messages almost daily from people on Instagram and an email telling me what happened to you also happened to me. And my faith was also hijacked by a sheikh, or I was also abused by a religious man, and the Muslim community stood by him and stood against me, etc. And so if they want to know more about, what happened to me they can learn through reading Things That Shatter. They can, follow me on Instagram. Again, it's Kaighla Dayo. KaighLaUmDayo. My eldest son, his name is Dayo, so that's my kunya. They can email me at KaighLaUmDayo@gmail.com.
So I'm going to use this as a conclusion, this last question. And, a lot of people that listen to this episode, not a lot, sorry, some of them may get scared off now from accepting Islam. So what would you actually say to that sort of a person about Islam and why they should continue to pursue their religion of Islam?
Mm-hmm. So I've actually been accused of that in the past by people, that by telling the truth about my experience, I'm scaring people away. And my response to that is always the same. I don't have that power. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says again and again, it is Allah who guides people and it is Allah who leads people astray. And I don't have that power. I am not Allah. I am simply telling the truth of my experience, because I would so much rather have known about all of this than what really happened, because I would have made an informed decision. I think I still would have accepted Islam if I had been informed about this. And so to those people, I say, trust your intuition, be alone with God, and sit and ask yourself, what do you truly believe about your creator, about your purpose in life, about what will happen to you after death? What does your heart tell you when you read the Quran, when you sit in nature, when you love your children? What do you feel about the Tawheed, about the oneness of Allah? Because that is fundamentally what's at stake here, is your nearness to your creator. Everything else, all of the complex, all of that, that's all, side issues. None of that is really the core of it. What really matters at the end of the day is, are you drawing near to the source of life and beauty and love and justice and mercy? That is our creator God. That is the one and the only God, the destroyer and the provider and the divine breaker of things. And I mean, God is so much bigger and so much more powerful than we ever give God credit for. And I would say that I fully trust God to guide whom God will. And I'm grateful that I don't have the power to either guide anyone to Islam or take anyone away. I have made my intentions known to Allah, and I search my intentions often. And I know that Allah and I are on good terms. And I know that what I want is to see people having peace through connection with Allah. That is my sole ambition. In telling these stories, is to see them have a real and authentic connection with their creator. And if my story scares them away, then Islam is not for them and Allah is not going to guide them, and that's not anything I've done. And I would say, as Anne Lamott, the author, says, if people wanted you to write warmly about them, they should have behaved better. By honestly exposing the injustices and the abuse of these mashayikh that books like mine are, and organizations like Heart and like Face are doing to expose this kind of abuse, it's not us. It's not the exposer who should be blamed. It's the one who did it in the first place. And so if anybody could argue that my story is pushing people away from Islam, I would argue the sheikh who abused me is pushing people away from Islam. I'm simply being honest about what happened.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kaighla. I really enjoyed your, all the truths that you talked about today. The thing that really strikes me the most about what you said is that, Islam is perfect, God is perfect, people have faults and Muslims have faults. So, this is the overall picture that I get from your story today.
Absolutely. And Muslims are not any more evil or whatever than anybody else either. They're not better and they're not worse. They're just human. And that's okay. I mean, we're all just trying to survive here. And I don't think that Muslims are decidedly worse than any other, religious group. They're also not better. And I think that's kind of what I want to get across. We need to be honest with ourselves and show one another grace for the ways that we fail.
Okay, thanks, Kaighla. So I'll put the links to the books into the show notes. If anyone's interested in reading them, then it's probably a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
And okay, so that's it for now. Thank you for coming onto the show, Kaighla. May the peace and blessings of God be upon you and to all our listeners out there. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam.